Well, good morning. It's good to be with you. And Emily's letting me have a little go with her boards this morning, which is very exciting. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below if you think I should have another try another week, but I don't think I'm going to be as good as her. We'll see. So this morning, we've got the whole story of the Old Testament on these boards. Last week, we zoomed in on a tiny little bit because we were going to place someone on the board, weren't we? We were going to place Isaiah on our board. This week, we've got the whole story of the Old Testament opened up again. Remember, Jesus is right down here. Jesus is just off the end of the Old Testament. He's at the start of the New Testament, isn't he? So we've got Jesus here, and then we walk back 500 years from Jesus to the time of the exile of Nehemiah, of Esther. And that's a time when the priests are in charge, and God sends prophets to these priests to help them to do their job better. And then after the exile, for 500 years, we can walk back from the exile through this time here when the kings are in charge, aren't they? The kings are in charge. And God sends them prophets to help them to do their job better too. And Isaiah was one of the prophets that was sent to help the kings to do their job better. So then we've got to about 1,000 years before Jesus. We walk back another 500 years from the kings through the time of the judges, right back to Moses. We find a time when the judges are in charge, and God gives them the law to help them to do their job well. So we have the time of the judges, and then before the judges, before Moses, we have 500 years of being in Egypt and different things until we get back to the story of Joseph and Isaac and Jacob and Abraham. We can come to those another week. So where do you think this week we can put the story of our new character, Gideon? Where do you think Gideon is going to go in? Is Gideon going to go down here with the priests? Or is Gideon going to go here with the kings? Is he a judge? Or is he going to go over here with Joseph in the time in Egypt? Alexis, do you want to show us? Brilliant work, Alexis. Gideon is a judge. In fact, he's not just any judge. Gideon is a judge who's a judge over Israel for 40 years. He looks after Israel. And during the time of the Judges, we find this really fun thing. You can read about the story of the Judges in the book of Judges. Here, and we have this Gideon's name label just here. You can read about the story of the Judges in the book of Judges. And we have this really funny thing that happens again and again and again with the Judges, is that we find the people get in a big mess. So they cry out to God to help them. And then God sends them a saviour who puts them back on their feet. But then they get complacent, they get mean and selfish, and they fall back into a big mess again. And again and again and again, when they get in their mess, they cry out for help. God helps them, but then they make themselves back into a big mess again. I don't know if your bedroom is anything like that. But we find the story again and again. And God sends saviours to the people of Israel again and again. And he sends the most unlikely types of saviours. People like Jeremiah was a saviour for Israel, a helper for Israel, who was just completely unexpected. He was way too young. Isaiah never thought of himself as someone who could be a saviour. Elijah never thought of himself as someone who could be a saviour. Ruth never thought of herself as someone who could be a saviour. Moses had a stutter and didn't even think he could speak, let alone save his people. And certainly with Gideon, we have someone who never thought he was good enough or strong enough or wise enough or brave enough to be the saviour that God has called him to be. For us, we find ourselves in a big mess. And we find that God sends us a saviour, the most unexpected type of saviour, a baby born in a manger. God sends us the saviour, Jesus, who then calls us to stand on our own 2 feet and to show other people his love and to show other people his grace. And sometimes we feel like we can't quite live up to that calling. We can't quite live as the people that Jesus has called us to live. And so then we can read the story of Gideon or the story of these saviours that God sends to see a little bit about what God thinks about us, to find out that God can even use us in our mess. And so I hope that as you have an opportunity to look through your packs, you'll hear a little bit of what God thinks about you, and how you can do the work that God has called you to do, even as Roger is speaking to the rest of us to continue our series in Turning the Tables in Luke's Gospel. So thanks very much for listening. Have a great morning. See you soon.